Hey, yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. This is Smart TCG, and today I'm going to be going over my tier list for the upcoming Sacramento Regional Championship. Sacramento will be the first major tournament in the United States with Surging Sparks legal, and I wanted to go over where I currently think the top decks are heading into this tournament. So with that being said, if you enjoy the content, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and let's hop right into it here. So we got tier S going to be just the overall best deck in the format. Some of my tier lists in the past don't actually have a tier S deck. However, I think in this video we are actually going to have one. Just overall, just a dominating deck over the standard format. We got tier A, very solid deck, just able to consistently perform well, very few flaws. Tier B are going to be decks that are relatively decent, might have a couple of flaws or a really tough matchup against the tier A decks, but still could potentially do well. Then tier C and D will be some of the weaker decks, but could potentially show up and surprise people. So let's hop right into it here. We're going to be going over some of the new decks that have been getting a lot of talk recently. We're going to start with Lost Zone Toolbox Pikachu. I think this deck has a lot of potential. I've been play testing this deck, and I think it's really good. One of Lost Zone's biggest issues has been the Regidrago matchup, but with Pikachu, that matchup becomes significantly better. So I've decided for my testing that this is a tier A deck. I think it's really good, and I think it has a lot of potential moving forward. Next up here, we have just regular Pikachu Magneton. I think is a tier C deck. I think it is really cool. However, consistency is a huge issue with it. It's not able to get going. So with that being said, I think it is a tier C deck. Next up here, we're going to go over some decks that have been performing really well in tournaments. We got Palkia and Terrapagos. So we're going to start off here with Terrapagos. Where is it? All right, there it is. Okay. We got Terrapagos. Terrapagos still tier A deck, very good. There's two variants you can play: the hyper aggressive variant or the Buffalo with Penny Turo. I think they're both good. I've been playing more of the hyper aggressive turbo variant without the Buffaloes, but it kind of depends on what matchups you're really trying to focus on. I think that the turbo variant does a lot better against Gardevoir, whereas the Buffalo variant does better against things like Charizard, Lugia, and I guess like Regidrago, whereas also the turbo one does better against some of the quick decks. For example, Raging Bolts, you're much better against just because you're a little bit more consistent overall. So it kind of depends on what matchups you're really trying to beat. So overall, deck's really good. Has some sketchy matchups against some of the top decks. If Zard comes back, that matchup is really scary. And your Regidrago matchup has kind of been 50-50. So it's definitely good, but you kind of have to fight against every deck because you don't have a ton of exceptional matchups except against the turbo decks, and the rest of your matchups are all kind of 50-50. So it's a decent deck, though. I definitely think it's going to do well. All right, next up here we got Gardevoir. Gardevoir, a very good deck right now. I think it is a tier A deck. Very powerful. Most recently did quite well at the Latin American International Championships. We saw one in top 8, plenty in day 2 as well. More of the Henry Chow variant with multiple rare candies and secret box. Very good deck right now. I have a lot of respect for it heading into this tournament. I think it's going to do well. Next up, we got Lugia. I think Lugia is a tier B deck. It has kind of fallen recently. Its Pikachu matchup is relatively difficult. There still is the existence of Iron Thorns as well. So I think Lugia is a deck that is weakened quite a bit heading into this event. Not as good as it used to be, but still is a decent deck overall. It just kind of comes down to, does it set up? And sometimes it does and it feels amazing. But then there's those times where it just doesn't set up, and that sometimes happens a little bit too often for some people playing the deck. So Lugia, still a solid deck, but definitely has a lot more problems, in my opinion, that it didn't necessarily have a few weeks ago. Next up here, we got Palkia Noctowl. I think Palkia Noctowl is really strong. This deck did relatively decent in the Masters division and also seniors, getting second place at LAIC in the senior division. I think it's decent. You have access to kind of the best of both worlds. You got Palkia, but you also have the turtle piece as well, so that you get access to Noctowl, which is really cool. You don't have access to Dusknoir, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I still think the deck is pretty cool. You're able to hit huge numbers with Area Zero and Palkia. I think the deck is decent. The one thing holding this deck back is the Zard matchup. The Zard matchup is just very tough. One of your worst matchups, and if Zard sees a lot of play, you're definitely going to run into some problems if you play against a lot of them. So overall, I think the deck is good, but I have it in tier B. Next up here, we're going to go over Charizard. I think Charizard is very well positioned for this tournament. I think it's one of the better decks, one of the most underrated decks in the format right now, which sounds kind of crazy to say. However, I think the deck is really good right now. Has decent matchups against Gardevoir. Your matchup against also Regidrago it's really not that bad. It's actually pretty close. So I think Charizard is a force and is going to do well this tournament. Next up, let's go over some of the other decks. Raging Bolt, I think, is a tier 2 deck. Its matchup spread is just okay overall. It is one of the more aggressive decks in the format, so you're very good at stealing games. However, I think for this event, it's a little bit weaker right now. I feel like with the rise of Gardevoir recently, with Charizard coming back into play, you just take a lot of tough matchups against the top decks. So I'm going to put Raging Bolt in tier B at the moment. I'm actually going to put it down a little bit towards the bottom, but I still think someone will do well. It's very fast, very aggressive, relatively easy to pick up as well. So Raging Bolt at tier B. Lost Zone Toolbox, I think, is a tier B deck. I think Lost Zone Pika is just better, but, you know, Lost Zone Toolbox still solid, just really struggles to Regidrago. Decks like Ceruledge as well, I think, are a tier, probably top of tier C deck. I think the deck is decent. I guess I could put it right here, actually, because I do think it's a little bit better than people give it credit for. I think Goldengo and Ceruledge both aren't that bad. So we'll put that right there. I think the deck is not bad. It can do quite a bit of damage. I think Goldengo, though, is just a little bit better. Has access to Energy Search Pro, so is able to hit huge numbers on the second turn. And your Pokemon is also a consistency engine with that coin bonus ability. So I think Goldengo is actually pretty good. I'm almost inclined to put it over Raging Bolt the more that I think about it. Yeah, I think Goldengo is good. I think it has a lot of potential. Next up, we got things like Miraidon. I think Miraidon is decent. I know some people have been hyping it up. However, I don't necessarily see the hype. I think it's just average. I think its matchups against things like Charizard still remain difficult. Your matchups against Turtle, I don't think is great either. Your Drago matchup is probably fine because you can just run them over, but I think it has some problems. I think it's decent, though. I could definitely see putting it in the bottom of tier B. Next up, we got Hydreigon. Hydreigon's a fun deck. Definitely is cool, though. I've seen some lists see some success in online tournaments. Kind of feels like a deck that we're going to need to see, you know, a top player or someone with a lot of experience with the deck go and play in a tournament and see success with it to really kind of judge it. But at the moment, I haven't been super impressed by it. It's just a little bit too inconsistent. Pidgeot Control, I think, is a tier C deck. It's just decent. Doesn't do amazing against a lot of the top decks. I don't think your Drago matchup is very good. I don't think if you play against a Dusknoir deck, if they know what they're doing, it's very good either. So I have Pidgeot Control in tier C. Snorlax is a tier B deck. It's decent right now. It's always good when people kind of forget about it. So I think Snorlax deserves its spot in tier B. Next up, we got things like Iron Thorns. It's just matchup roulette. That's kind of the biggest thing about it, is that you really don't have any control in a lot of situations over a lot of matchups. So Iron Thorns, in my opinion, goes in tier C. Next up here, we got a couple of other decks. We got Ancient Box, I think, is another tier C deck. I actually don't have a tier D deck. I don't think there's anything that's just terrible. I think all these decks are all kind of decent. So Ancient Box has been around. It does okay against things like Drago. Your Charizard matchup has been a problem for quite some time, is quite difficult because it's so hard to hit those big numbers. So there are some problems for sure. We got Palkia Dusknoir. Palkia Dusknoir is pretty good. Just is kind of a solid tier B deck. I kind of like Palkia Noctowl a little bit more, though. So I have Palkia Noctowl over it. Palkia Dusknoir just has big problems with Regidrago, whereas Palkia Noctowl doesn't. I think Palkia Noctowl is actually pretty decent into Regidrago, which is one of Palkia Noctowl's biggest things going for it. So that's, I think, a thing that kind of separates the decks. But, you know, Palkia Dusknoir is pretty decent overall. Last up here, we have Regidrago. I did say towards the beginning of the video that there would be a tier S deck, and that is going to be a Regidrago. I think Regidrago has gone through tier A. I've always been someone who, or I guess in recent videos, I've tried to be the person who doesn't always just slam a bunch of, you know, tier S decks. However, I'm looking at the data here. The data has shown that Regidrago is far and away the best deck. The past, 3 to 4 tournaments, it's absolutely dominated. It's won the Latin American International Championships, getting first and second, also won in top 4. It also won the, I believe, Gdańsk Regional Championships. We had Alberto Conti win that event, taking down Tord Reklev in finals. It won also the Lille Regional Championships with James Cox. It was in top 8 at Louisville, and it's just been on an absolute tear recently. So I got to put Regidrago in tier S. It's amazing. It has all eyes on it. People are going into this tournament trying to beat it. However, I don't think that there are a lot of decks that are really, really good right now that can actually convincingly beat it. But Anyways, that is going to do it for the video today. Let me know what you think of the tier list in the comments. Best of luck to anyone attending the upcoming Sacramento Regional Championships or anyone that is just looking for help heading into Surging Sparks. I hope you found this helpful. But anyways, if you enjoyed the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And with that being said, thanks for all the support as always. This is Smart TCG, and I'll speak with you guys again soon. Peace out, everyone.